All right, guys, I'm going to help you out with number 7 and 8 on tonight's homework. And remember that I have canceled 4 and 5. You don't need to do those tonight. If you use a calculator on those, you're going to get an error message. So we're going to not deal with that today because I haven't really told you about pi over 2 and how to evaluate the different trig functions for that. So we're going to focus on 7 and 8, and I'm going to give you a little video on how to do those. 7 is giving us a negative angle, and we're going to ignore the fact that it's negative just for a moment. And we're going to say, how would we take pi over 4 and convert it to degrees? Well, we have our handy proportion that we can use, which is 180 over pi equals however many degrees we're dealing with over the radians we're given. So we can move forward and do what we would normally do. I would rewrite the right-hand side of that equation because I don't like dividing by a fraction. So I'm going to multiply x by the reciprocal, which is the same as leaving it so that I have 4x over pi. And now that it's here, we've got a pretty easy situation. I'm going to multiply both sides by pi. That's going to allow me to cancel out those pi's from both sides. Remember, we're trying to avoid cross-multiplying here. We don't want to just use that without really understanding why it works. So we end up with 180 equals 4x, and the last thing we're going to have to do is divide both sides by 4. So we will end up with that x equals 45 degrees. Now, I want to let you in on a little trick that might help you out a ton here. We'll go back to the top, and we'll use this pi over 4. If we know that pi is 180, it's very quick for us just to do 180 divided by 4. And that's a fast way to do these conversions if you have radians and you want degrees. If you have degrees and you want radians, it's a little trickier to do that. But if you've got radians, that's a very fast way. Just plug in 180 for pi and then evaluate. All right, so now the question is, if we've got a negative 45 degrees, and let me write it, sine of negative 45. Where does that land us in our coordinate plane? I'll put that right over here to the side in blue. So here's our coordinate plane. Normally we go this direction, but because we're going negative, we're going to go negative 45 degrees, so we're going to move that direction. So here is our triangle that we're going to use, where this is 45 degrees. So that's the reference angle we're going to end up with. And remember that in the unit circle, the hypotenuse has a length of 1. So if we adjust the other two sides, we'll end up with radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. Now we just have to figure out what is sine of 45 degrees. All right, well, that's going to be opposite over hypotenuse. And if this is where our angle is, that's going to be radical 2 over 2 over 1, which ends up just being radical 2 over 2. Remember, over 1 really doesn't change anything, so we don't have to put that in there. And now we just have to think, if we're in quadrant 4, add sugar to coffee, is sine positive? And the answer is that it isn't, because it's only positive in quadrant 2 or quadrant 1. So we're going to make sure that we write our answer as a negative radical 2 over 2. And that's the answer to number 7. For number 8, I'm going to use the shortcut. I'm not going to do this whole proportion thing, so it won't take quite as long. Okay? Number 8. Let's use our shortcut, and let's figure out what 7 pi over 6 is. Well, that's going to be the same as 7 times 180 over 6. And I can think of that one of two ways. I could do 7 times 180, which is huge, but I'm not going to be able to do that in my head. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do 180 divided by 6, which is much easier, and then multiply that by 7. 180 divided by 6 is 30 degrees, and 7 times 30 degrees is 210. So now I'm just looking for cosecant of 210, but that's a much bigger degree, or much bigger angle than we're used to working with, because if I draw my coordinate plane, I can see that in here would be less than 90, 180. I got to pass that. So I'm going to end up here. There's my triangle. There's my right angle. 210 is 30 degrees past the 180 mark. So that's a 30-degree angle, which makes this a 30, 60, 90 triangle. If my hypotenuse is 1, then that makes this side 1/2 and this side radical 3/2. And that comes from our special right triangles. We adjusted the sides according to the length of that hypotenuse. So really, we're dealing with cosecant of 30 in quadrant 3. Cosecant is the reciprocal function of sine. So if sine is opposite over hypotenuse, then cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, which means 1/2, which is the same as 1 times 2/1, or 2. So now we just have to determine, is cosecant going to be positive in quadrant 3? Add sugar to coffee. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so it would only be positive if we were in this quadrant or this quadrant, so it's going to end up being negative. -2 is your answer. Okay? So that's quite a bit of help for 7 and 8. Hope that was useful for you. Good luck on the rest of it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.